Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Carol Grant. Carol is a marketing strategist with over 20 years experience across multiple areas, including product marketing, digital, retail, enterprise, and SaaS. Carol is currently heading up marketing at Syndio, a SaaS company focusing on helping large enterprises achieve workplace equity. She is the mother of 2 boys, a wife of an amazing supportive partner, and a closet real estate junkie. Carol, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Hi, Brandi. First of all, that video intro is amazing.
Thank you. I know my team probably was sick of me as we were preparing to launch the podcast because I was like, okay, move this over, try this picture, replace that. I got like a little extra with the editing. So
it paid off. It's great.
Appreciate it.
Great.
I have to say, like, I read your bio and mine reads very similarly that we've been in this industry for 20 years. And I promise we definitely don't look old enough to have been in marketing for 20 years. So much, love working with awesome, amazing other women in business, especially. No shame to my guys. But I'm happy to have you here on the couch.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And I like to break the ice with a little woo-saw moments that I call buzzword banishment. So tell me, what buzzword would you like to get rid of forever?
It's a little self-serving at the moment because it's the thing causing me anxiety right now, me and my team. Predictability and repeatability. And yes, and not because it's not important, because I think it is. I think it's kind of this shift of thinking of like, given that we are a startup, we've built this amazing marketing team within a 3 to 4 to 6 month period, rapidly fast, right? And predictability and repeatability, right? That takes time. If my boss listens to this, she's probably gonna have a heart attack when I'm saying this. Because every week she's like, when are we getting to predictability? And so I just think it's more of a timing and kind of just setting that understanding and that expectation really of like, hey, when you are, building new marketing motions, really getting a sense for who your audience is, almost starting from scratch, predictability is not going to come right away, right? And you do need kind of that over time, quarter by quarter, working the plan, analyzing, assessing, and tweaking to then start to get to like what's really working. I also feel like it's a bit fraught, and I'm learning this in real time, because an enterprise sale is so complex. I don't actually ever know if there's going to be this formula of predictability. I think there are things that we will learn and figure out types of things that work in general, or what type of touch points work to really move that to opportunity. So that's one lens, but also the market's ever changing, right? And so to me, when you say predictability, it's almost like until when, right? Because doing the same thing over and over again almost makes it seem as like the market doesn't change or customers don't change or evolve. So to me, it's a bit fraught, and I think it needs probably a little bit of a rework in terms of how we think about it.
Yeah, I can say the most predictable thing in marketing is the fact that everything's going to change. And that, that's kind of the only thing we can predict, because you are right. Like, I mean, even just thinking about the pandemic, think about how much everything changed based on something that no one could have predicted would happen.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
all the plans and the things that work and any testing you did before 2019, it's irrelevant, because nothing is the same as what it was. And so
Exactly.
I'm with you in that I do believe that you do get to a point where there is some level of expectation or predictability that you can say exists when you've seen the same consistent results. But on the repeatability side, I'd actually argue that, and this is a buzzword that a previous guest has banished, but scale, like repeatability really is about scale. Like, is it
That's
something
true.
we can do over and over in an effective way? So I still like scale and repeatability, but we will go ahead and put both of those words in the box. And
for further evaluation.
Right. At least for this conversation.
Yes. Sounds like a plan. I'm with that. Sounds like a plan, Brandi.
Well, now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me, what brings you to Revenue Rehab today?
Yeah. So, we in marketing have scaled a team really fast. And one of the big challenges we had is like, how do we remain true to kind of the mission of Syndio, who we are, and really make sure we are putting our best foot forward when it comes to really hiring diverse talent. Syndio is a SaaS company, as you mentioned, that focuses on helping enterprises identify, measure inequities in the workplace, more specifically in pay and opportunity equity. But, it does start with making sure you have that diverse talent coming in. And I do think as the labor market tightened, it became even trickier to really set out strategies, and not only set out strategies, like hold to them, right? Because, because you get desperate, right? Like when you are working with a lean team and, you got to get things done, kind of try not to let desperation take over, and really, making sure you're building up the pipeline in a way that you feel good that you have, the best representation, right, of the market and what's available.
And I can definitely say from experience that the worst hiring decisions are made when you make them out of desperation. And I mean, the stories I could tell, but we won't go there.
Maybe that's for after the podcast.
Yes, those are, that's one of those cocktail conversations. But before we jump in, I believe in setting intentions. It gives us purpose, it gives us focus, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should expect from our conversation. So tell me, what are your intentions? What are your best hopes? What do you want people to take away from our discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to diverse talent and really kind of trying to build a world-class marketing team with diverse talent, right? It's really making sure you have the right HR partner. You guys are working really closely together to really kind of set forth the strategy. Like even when I started, I don't know, like week 2, we were growing the marketing team, right? I mean, we were having conversations around, usually our roles are like Seattle, New York, and DC based. I'm kind of like, are we gonna do full remote so that we can kind of open up the wider labor pool and get that diverse talent? We were strategizing, working together on, are there organizations that we can partner with who would allow us to have more access to diverse talent? So I think it's really like, and it depends on how big your company is, right? Like, but usually in a startup, in a small company, HR is only so big.
Right.
And so if you really want to be able to kind of activate and hire and grow diverse talent, sometimes that means partnering a little bit more closely than what you'd be used to with HR. So I think that's one, like, don't be afraid to really kind of be in there with HR, be a true partner, and really kind of align on what your strategy is, even down to like pipeline goals. Like we had I think it was like roughly a 35%, because we just wanted to make sure like, okay, we are getting diverse talent, and we had conversations. We ended up upping that to 50%, right? And said like, hey, it may take some time, and that's fine. But again, it's that like work with them to set the strategy and then hold true to it. And it, labor market, like I said, it's hard, but it will be really worth it. So I think that's one takeaway. I think the other takeaway too, right, is there's no peanut butter approach. Like I can tell you the 4 things we did. It probably is not going to apply to everybody, right? So it's kind of really thinking through for your unique business, the skills you need, the job functions you need, what is the right strategy that's going to make sense. And so just the other thing is like, there's no peanut butter approach, like it, especially if you're doing it right. And then right. it should look a little different for everybody.
So let's jump in and let's start with the 4 things that you did, because I do agree that there is no one size fits all.
Yeah.
And, we've been in a similar boat in that we are also a small company. We're a team of 26, I think now, somewhere between 25 and 30, and very niche in what we do. And so there, we had to make significant efforts because there was one role we had open and we received 400 plus applications. And these are the actual qualified ones, not the, the trash, the ones that you're like,
yeah,
not a shot.
You're so, like the job. It's like your job isn't even the same job.
Right. Like, oh,
so you don't even do anything
there.
related.
But, so we had roughly 400 and something viable, like that they at least were worth a solid review. And once we went through and this was back when we still did, like we've changed our hiring process, but when we still did a lot of like true first calls, and we would do them in video, in that pool of people, there was a very small number, and I can't remember the exact number, but a very small number of candidates that were minorities. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we, want to genuinely make sure that we have good diversity, and not just on race. In this case, that's the thing that is most obvious when someone joins a video call, but just, thinking about everything, it was like, okay, how do we do that? Like, how do we make sure that as an organization, we are a diverse organization when what we're seeing come through in this abundance is very much the majority? So I'm interested in hearing, what are those things that you all did to help to recruit more diverse talent?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I already talked about. I'll just reiterate. Setting just the higher bar and expectation on what we wanted to see coming in the pipeline before we had full-on interview loops and vetting people. And so that was really being bold and bullish, in a tight labor market, and knowing that like, I've got to scale a team because 2022 is coming and we got to drive demand. So I got to like scale a team now, being bullish and knowing that, if we set this goal, we have to then make sure we're having the right strategies to meet that goal. To the second point, we ended up partnering with an organization that provides access to more diverse talent, called Color Wave. They got on our radar through one of our strategic advisors, and I will say Syndio. This is my first startup, but as I look at Syndio compared to other startups, we really, really do a good job to make sure like our strategic advisor network is diverse, so that we can kind of tap them to try and find diverse talent or help with strategies to finding diverse talent. So Color Wave is an organization that came through our strategic advisor network that we ended up partnering with. The other thing that I already mentioned is we just like made a decision to like, we're just going to have the roles be remote, and just not kind of dictate this like major city of locations like being located near there. We're like, listen, it's like the age of COVID. Work is shifting, work is changing. Syndio was already doing remote work for like a year completely. And so it's like, if we really want to be able to walk our talk, right? And because we are in this place of workplace equity, like that is our business. We need to kind of lower those barriers to help us do that. And so setting like remote work across the board was one way that we were able to kind of get more access to more diverse talent. And, you know, a few other things, like structuring the interviews to remain consistent, right, across candidates. And so, you know, I'd be curious kind of your scenario that you were talking about. By the time it kind of got to you, the pool was, you know, embedded and the pool was smaller. You know, I'd be curious, like kind of how they were being vetted, like how consistent was that across all the candidates, right? Because we do find like when you're kind of holding it consistent and making sure everybody has a similar experience, it just kind of really helps to kind of set the stage, but then also make sure we're not inadvertently injecting bias into that part of the process and then ending up on the other end of where we're trying not to be. We also really assess based on competencies. And so the one thing I love about Syndio is we have a clear philosophy that, yes, experience matters, but it's not everything. And so we really try and assess for skill and competency. I'm proof of that. I'm a first-time CMO, right? Like, you know, I've been in marketing for a long time, but as you know, marketing is multifaceted, right? Yeah. And so, you know, my CEO said, you have the skills. Like, you may not have had the experience of scaling a marketing team and building, but you have the skills and you have the capabilities, right? And so we really try and also assess on that level of really thinking about skills and capability. And a lot of how we unearth that is we sometimes we have a lot of like homework takeaways for interviewers. So it's giving everybody the same opportunity to kind of show what they can bring to the role, and the questions remain consistent, right? So I think that's another thing that we really try and do to boost how we're getting in diverse talent.
And hearing you talk about this is really a good affirmation for me that like we're doing the right things. Because you talked about like, you know, if I go back to when I first started, our interview process was typical. Like it wasn't broken, but it very much was sort through the resumes, have the first call where you talk through like what the role is, ask some of the basic, you know, qualifying questions and so on and so forth. And, you know, it was fine enough. And we went through a period of some really bad hires. And it was actually damaging to the brand. Like we are consultants, which means we are the experts in our field. And when you have multiple people making mistakes, like our reputation is everything.
It reflects on the brand for sure.
And so very much it was like, okay, hold up. Like, you know, this is messing with the money now. Like we got to figure this thing out. And in refiguring that out, like kind of the catalyst for that was a business need. But in refiguring that out, we did take the approach of how do we also make sure that we are being fair and equitable in how we are, you know, handling this process, that everybody has a fair shot. And the first thing that we did was exactly what you said in going through and figuring out how do we make sure that we are not interjecting unconscious bias. And so we did remove number of years of experience. Only our most senior roles have any real reference to expectation of, and we still don't use years, but you know, our most senior roles do have a little bit of that in there because it does actually matter. But other than that top tier of role, it really much is exactly what you're saying in what's the experience? Like, can you demonstrate that you've got the skill that we need? The other thing that we did was, I don't want to say automate because it's not automated, but taking the human component out of the early stages. So we have candidates, we have a landing page that has a bunch of videos. So everyone hears the exact same thing about pay, the way we work, the interview process, like all these things. And they go through the whole thing. And if they're still interested after reading and listening, and we're real transparent with the salary, then there's a survey. And that survey, actually, we've worked with a professional, the people that understand the studies, to give us a baseline of, does this person have the competency that we need for this specific role? And anybody that scores where they need to be moves forward. Anybody that doesn't. And so it completely takes out that it's not subjective. It's not, the initial person liked them or didn't like them or whatever. And
there's no personal identifiers in it. Like you said, you're with the name. So it's just literally your response.
Yeah. So, technically your name is in there. So the calculation can be associated back to who you are, but the score is an automated calculation purely based on your answer.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's like, and so that has really, really helped. And I can say in the past couple of years, when it comes to talent, like, we have nailed it. Like, sometimes I am in awe at just, we have an amazing team in general, but if I look at those that were hired under this new process, it's just, so spot on. And we also, as a company of 25, with a 4-person leadership team, our team is 50% women, 25% minority, being me. You look at all of our other stats, like, we are above all of the averages. And so it's clear that it works.
Yes.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the fact that I really appreciate that you guys found a partner to support you, because I do think that's a challenge, especially in large organizations, that they're not thinking about. Is, I'll hear people say, I've tapped my whole network and I can't find any minority talent. And I'm like, well, what's your network look like? It's like, you went to Princeton, you live in Boston, it's like, and I'm using some stereotypical things here.
No, but you're right, Brandi. I live in Seattle now at 14 years. I've been in big tech. When I got here, people were like, can you tap your network? I looked at my network. I'm like, they're all white. Like, that's my network. So no, that's not going to be helpful.
And so that is important, is actually recognizing what your circle looks like.
Yeah.
So that if it is not diverse, and, again, race is kind of the obvious thing because you see it. But when you think about gender expression, socioeconomic background, education background, religion,
neurodiversity,
all of those things, bring diversity of thought into the organization. So what, and I'm going to look up Color Wave because I'm really intrigued, but help me understand, what did they do with your organization? Were they the recruiting partner? Were they, almost in a consulting capacity? Help me understand more about that relationship.
I will do my best, because I don't have my HR person on here who handled like all of the logistics, but they have a really robust database that we can tap into. They post the role within their database, and they also help funnel, like, I think they sent her like daily kind of like, here's a match of like who we think would be good for this role. So it was somewhat automated, but it was just the access, knowing that that was essentially a platform where we knew we can tap into for diverse talent. And so, it was a bit automated, and it worked probably like just a regular job posting site, but we definitely did have a point of contact who would work with us on, making sure we were able to they were able to help curate and help us identify like people who would be a match. And I'm sure there's others. And also too, when I was looking, I did see also a couple different member-based organizations that focus on like Black marketing executive professionals as well. Some of the names I'm blanking on. But I think like overall, the takeaway is, there are these organizations out there, right, that almost make scaling this strategy easier. Because I like for the first month to 2 months when we were, trying to make sure we had access to diversity, it was just that. It was like, I'm on a WhatsApp with like the small network of, BIPOC executives I know. Can you tap your network? And it was very, very kind of grassroots, right? Which doesn't scale. And so I think tapping into these organizations and finding them and being able to build those relationships is quite critical.
Okay. And two things that you said that I want to jump into, shifting gears just a little bit, is one of the things that I have seen is a lot of, especially large organizations, making an effort to recruit, minority marketers at the entry level roles, kind of get them early, teach them, give them opportunity. And while I'm a firm believer that that is a great strategy, I think that it still leaves a huge gap in being able to drive diversity in the organization when all of the diversity only exists at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And what have you seen either in the work that Syndio is doing, or, any thoughts that you have around how do we get that diversity to, because if we look at percentages, it's like, okay, we now have this percent of minorities, but it's like, okay, they are all in your entry level roles.
Totally.
And, you look at the board slide or the executive, page on the website, and it's like, they are all.
It's like, it's not really trickling up. Yeah.
Like, how do we get there?
I think that's a great question. I mean, this is just this overall mission is one of the reasons that I joined Syndio, and they started on the path of like, we need to apply technologies as this idea of pay equity, equal pay for equal work. And over a year ago, they've been doing that for a while, but over a year ago, really realized, okay, wait a minute though. There is not only just an opportunity or inequity when we think about pay, but also pay is impacted by the type of roles you have access to, right? And then you weave that thread and connect. It's like, okay, and that means higher paying jobs, right? And that's where to your point, just what you're getting at, right? That's where you're starting to see that disconnect between Black people, people of color, where it's more entry level versus some of these other senior level roles. And one of the products that we're actually coming out with later in the year called Opportunity Equity helps companies unearth where those opportunities are. We do representation analysis to start with, and then we will weave into promotion analysis, really helping companies understand, here's what you look like. And so I would say like that's kind of the first thing. It's understanding, what do you really look like across all of these levels when we think about underrepresented groups, protected classes, but then also understanding what is actually the available market for those senior level roles, right? And it's understanding like, hey, if externally, I'm just going to make this up, if you're looking for a senior director of demand gen marketing, and the location that you are recruiting in, you see that there is external availability that, 50% of this role externally is made up of people of color, right? And then if you look internally at your feeder roles, meaning the roles that would be most likely to then accelerate and get promoted into that, if you're seeing that it's mainly, we only have like 20% Black people or people of color within those roles, your strategy then should probably be to externally hire, right? So it's understanding, what do you look like at these different levels? But the biggest thing is, what is the available talent? How diverse is the available talent, both internally and externally? Because there companies can get focused on like, what is the strategy, right? If you really want to push for diversity at all levels, especially in those senior level roles, manager roles, those roles that naturally get elevated, you gotta understand first what you look like, but then you gotta understand what is the availability talent pool internally and externally. That's something that our software helps companies do.
It's almost like your TAM, your total addressable market, but for people.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. I love that analogy. Exactly. Because I think where companies end up getting themselves or doing themselves a disservice, right, is they set these lofty goals. They're getting pressures from all sides. They know they don't, they could be doing better just based off of what they anecdotally look like, but they don't have the concrete data to really put numbers behind it. And then they end up setting goals that aren't realistic, right? Like if you're over here setting goals like, oh, we're going to have 70% Black women in, leadership level roles in 2 years or 5 years. But then when you look at the available talent, be like, there's only 30% Black women that even do this function, right? Like, it's like the goal doesn't make sense. It's not realistic. And so, it really is about getting the data, understanding what you look like based on the data, and then what is that available talent pool, both externally and internally, so you can set your strategy accordingly.
And I think the other kind of thing that I'm thinking about with the data is, I'm definitely data driven. So anytime you can give me data for something, I feel like I can make a better decision. But what I'm thinking about is that actually helps you even know how you're doing and where the gaps are. Because, I can think about, I guess we're only a year out now, in the height of when George Floyd was killed and the protests and things that happened after that. I was a part of a number of discussions where, there were predominantly white heads of marketing who genuinely wanted to know, what can we do? Like in our roles, not just in society, but in the world that I can impact directly, what can I do? And, understanding that I do inherently believe that the majority of people in the world are good people and, desire to do the right things and help to solve these problems. And in a lot of cases, it is really what do I do? Like, what can I directly impact? And I think even just seeing that gives you a clear, like you said, a way to create a strategy, like a clear step of, if I'd like more minority directors and I see all the feeder roles, there's not a single minority, that's my place to focus. Like those may be the roles where, most companies have a promote from within strategy, but that might be the role where I say, you know what, for the next year, I'm not going to promote. We're going external every single time.
Right.
And it's hard to fight those battles because, especially if you have a promote from within culture and you want to go to your HR team, your recruiting team and say, hey, I want to bypass our normal policy and not even open this up internally. Without some data or some reason, they're going to laugh you out of that conversation.
Exactly. The data is key.
Yeah, being able to say, look, here's what the industry, like, here's what's available. Here's what everyone else is doing. Here's where we are. And this is what I'm trying to solve. So for everything else, we're going to, do what we normally do. For this scenario, we're going to make an effort. And just thinking about if every CMO or every executive, I mean, hell, it doesn't have to just be limited to fixing things in marketing. If every executive had access to that data to find that one place that they could influence to be able to get more talent in the right places, think about how much more diverse our organizations, especially in marketing, would be.
Yeah. Yes. It's game changing in a way. And, it may be obvious, because it's not like companies haven't been trying to solve this problem for some time, right?
Right.
And setting all types of goals. But it's like when you have the data and the insights, like those gaps in areas of opportunity become like prevalent really quickly, right? And again, it's about setting goals that are realistic and attainable. And you can't do that if you don't know like what is really the availability both on the outside and internally.
Yeah, it makes it, I think the attainability is the key thing you hit on there, because if I'm in a, Fortune 500 company and I know we don't have much diversity, and especially in senior roles, and I say I want to influence that. If we've got, 50,000 employees worldwide, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, what do I do about that? Like it feels like
It's
too
daunting.
much. Right. And then
It's
on top of that, it's
daunting.
like I got a whole actual job besides
Yeah.
trying to, and so it becomes too much.
Yeah.
But if you
It
were
can
to
be
say,
overwhelming.
right, here's your big gap in your department, here is where you need to try to find diversity, that feels like something I can do without trying to like solve world peace and,
Yeah.
do all of these things.
And that's how we coach our customers. Like it's going on this journey can feel daunting, both from a pay equity perspective and being able to make sure as you promote people or people want to move internally that is also equitable. And a lot of times with customers, like, start with one function. Don't boil the ocean.
Yeah.
Start with one department, right? Start with one leader, one department, and really kind of get those quick wins, and then start to expand it, because then you can build the muscle. And then you can also see, like, it really isn't, it's not unattainable. Yes, it's hard work, but it's doable, it's achievable. And sometimes if you start small, it just makes it even more so. So that's how we coach our customers.
So, talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. So, we got to talk about what we do from here. And in traditional therapy, the therapist gives the client homework. But at Revenue Rehab, I like to flip that on its head and have
Okay.
you to give us homework. So, Carol, if you could summarize for me your key takeaways, and then give our listeners that one thing. What is the one thing that you would like our listeners to do? The action item that we can all take, ideally within the next 30 days. I try to go with, like, things we can actually do after listening to this podcast, to help to move the needle in workplace equity and recruiting diverse talent.
Yeah. So I would say, the one thing when we think about recruiting for diverse talent and really, making sure your marketing organization or whoever else is listening, your organization is representative, right? Truly representative, of the market. You gotta build that relationship with your recruiter. And I would, like, more tangibly, literally sit down, 30-minute conversation. What are the strategies that you guys are using to recruit more diverse talent? And I would say, if some of the things that we talked about are missing, then I would follow up with, that all's great. Here are a couple other things, that I'm hearing in market that others are doing, right? Making sure you're setting really bold pipeline goals. Partnering with organizations. I think the partnering with organizations is such low-hanging fruit. Like, I think it's really kind of finding the right organizations who are helping get access to diverse talent. I think that's low-hanging fruit, because if you find one or two of the right ones, I think sky's the limit, and it'll really help. It'll really help scale. And I think really thinking about, I know everybody's kind of in a different place on the remote work spectrum, right? But really think through, like, is this role, like, does this role need to be location based? Can it be remote? Is there an offering here where if I really want this person to be on site at certain point in time, can you make it remote and maybe have some guardrail set up to where it's like, hey, we really need you to be on site once a month or once a quarter or whatever it is. But just thinking through, can you really open up the pool to broader than where you are, to really have access to more diverse talent? And then I think it's also thinking through, again, with your recruiter, when they go to screen, what are those screening questions and how consistent are they? And then another thing, that I think has really worked with us to kind of make sure that, even though we have a diverse pipeline, that we're really assessing for skills and capability, not just experience, you know, and especially depending on the role, like I would encourage, like, have some kind of take home homework or assignment. And it sounds small, but like, to me, that's a way to level the playing field across the candidates.
Yeah, because some people just don't interview well.
Some people don't interview well. Some people write better. Some people get their thoughts out more thoroughly in written form. So I feel like that's a really good way to level the playing field and be able to see with like a really solid scenario-based question, like how does this person think? How do they unpack this problem? So I would encourage you all to do that.
And I can say that's honestly been the biggest game changer for us is we have a scenario test that is the take home homework.
Yeah.
And, you know, we only really expect candidates to invest 60 to 90 minutes. Like it's not, you know, I know some companies get a little carried away. It's not like proprietary that we're getting like free work because that's kind of the other issue.
Yeah.
But it really does allow me to see how people think. And I can think of 2 different people within our company who, if it had just been based on resumes and typical interview questions, they would not have been the one. But when I was able to see their scenario and see how they thought through things, it took them from, I'll pass to get them on the phone now. Like it really does.
It makes a difference. We had the same challenge with one of our roles, a senior manager level role late last year, interviewed with a woman and interviewed with a man. The man was great, really had a lot of experience, had the skill, the way he talked, he really understood the mechanics of the role. Talked to the woman. She seemed fine, but like she was a little bit tentative in her approach. But still very interesting from a skill perspective. When they went to do the homework and submitted it, I mean, it was night and day. The gentleman we spoke with, I was like, you didn't even like try. Like it was like no competition. She pulled out all the stops, and she's one of our best. We hired her. She's one of our best performers. So it really does level the playing field. To your point.
So in summary, our one thing is to start by having a conversation with, you know, your HR, your recruiter, your internal person. So have a coffee, a lunch, a cocktail, a taco. You know, I am always great when the one thing yields some food because I stay hungry. So we're going to take your HR person out, you know, if nothing else for a coffee, virtual coffee, if you guys are remote, and talk about what is the strategy for recruiting diverse talent. Like that's your starting point. And especially if you yourself are a minority in any group, you will likely have ideas and things that you can interject into that strategy. And starting there, I agree with you completely, Carol, is a great place to start in moving the needle in the right direction to getting genuine diversity within your organization. Awesome. Well, Carol, I have enjoyed our discussion, but that's our time for today.
This was so much fun.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for joining me. I'm going to make sure that there is a link to Syndio in the show notes because even though the intent wasn't a shameless plug, hearing what you guys do is really amazing. And I can see how impactful just the data alone can be in making a difference in driving diversity. So we will make sure to share that link with our audience. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope that you have enjoyed my conversation with Carol. Can't believe we're already at the end. See you next time.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Thanks.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.